Gemini, welcome to your hopes, fears, and reality spread. As per usual, you can click right on that description box below, and it will talk about the significance of the spread as well as the placement of each card. So here we go. It's funny, I was just talking about the Queen of Cups in the inverse last night. And my observation of it was, and I talk about this a lot, the Queen of Cups is the only cup in the deck in the traditional Rider-Waite and spin-offs of that where she actually has a lid on her cup. So if you turn the Queen of Cups upside down, it's the only card in the deck that isn't like losing their shit. You know what I mean? Because it's about emotions. So you have the Queen of Cups in the inverse, and you have the Page of Wands in the inverse. So here's what you're hoping for, okay? Even if you don't get anybody else's help, even if you don't get anybody else's attention, and even if you enter this situation completely drained of energy, you don't want to lose your shit. Right? You don't want to lose control of your emotions. You don't want the fact that you are devastated that you are in this energy alone to show to anybody else. That's what you're hoping for. Even more so than a poker face, just not even to lose your shit behind closed doors. You're like, I just have to keep this together. Even if I can't get anybody else's assistance, even if all of this falls specifically on me, I just have to keep it together. The fear that you have is a complete lack of new direction, a complete lack of hope, and being stuck on the death of an idea. And by being stuck on the death of an idea is like, you know something isn't working the way it is, but you're holding on to the idea that you can fix it without having to transmute the energy. You know? In order to fix anything, you have to change the energy behind it. You can't take the same energy that didn't work on a problem and put it into the next problem. How do we say this? Oh my God. I'm trying to think of a good analogy. So, okay, I box, and I used to go to this boxing gym, right? And the bags were on this rack, you know, for us to do classes. And after years and years and years of hitting these bags, where the screw met with the hole in this rack, it would move just a little bit, just a little bit, just a little bit all the time. And eventually the screw would get worn down and that hole would get worn down just a little bit, right? And the screw would break before the rack because there was more metal on the rack than the screw, okay? So when the screw would break, the owner of the gym would get a new screw and he would put it in, right? But he never did anything to fix that hole that was there. He would just put that new screw in, right? So then after a while, and it would take less time now because there was even more wiggle room, the screw would break, the screw would break, the screw would break. He never addressed the size of that by filling it in with epoxy or maybe even just getting a new rack. Do you see what I mean? So I hope that's a good way to look at it. He only addressed part of the problem. Oop, these were in the inverse. So this is what the Ten of Swords reminds me of. It's like, this thing isn't working properly, but I can fix it just a little bit so it kind of works the way it did before, but I'm not really resolving the bigger issue. I'm not really making a prolonged, it's like putting a Band-Aid on something and hoping it'll just keep going a little longer and a little longer, you know? The truth of the matter was he had to fix the rack because the screws were just going to keep breaking every other month, even though the first one took like 6 years. Do you see what I mean? I don't know. Maybe that's not the best analogy, but here's where we're at. You are clinging onto or putting a band-aid on a situation that actually recalls renovation or deeper thinking than just putting that band-aid on it. So that's why that's your fear. That's why you can't find the new direction. That's why you can't find the hope. Because you're almost recognizing that you're white knuckling this problem and you're putting the same old energy into fixing a problem. But with that same old energy, the problem's never really going to be fixed. It's just these small temporary solutions. You need to change the energy behind it. You need to get a new rack. I don't know. Because eventually the rack's going to break, right? Eventually that hole's going to get so big that it will break to the bottom of the rack. Now what? Just replace it. You're going to have to replace it at some point anyway. Anyhow, the reality of the situation is you have to let go of that very specific target. And I want to say, Libra, I had a conversation with you either last read or the read before that about you trying to hit a very tiny target. And if you didn't get that very specific target, you were going to be completely disappointed. Maybe that was you guys. You can check the playlist. I always have the old readings. So this will be the current reading. Last week's reading will be at the top of the list, then before that. So it's in the most recent read on backward, I guess is the way to say it. But it's like you have to let go of a very specific idea in order to make room for new growth. So what I'm saying is you might be headed in a direction of new growth, but if you're looking for an exact outcome for every little thing that you put into play, know that it's not going to be perfect. So instead of aiming for a small target, just try and hit the board and then work on narrowing it down. Does that make sense? Because for right now, in order to make room for the new growth, you have to let go of that perfect picture, that specific outcome. And as something grows, please take a more organic and systematic approach. Go ahead and shoot your shot and just aim for getting it on the board. Once it's on the board, see where you were. Were you too high? Were you too low? Were you to the right? Were you to the left? Then adjust your sight and try again. With practice, you'll eventually start getting it where you need to go. It's too many analogies. I'm confusing myself. Gemini. Always up in your head. But it's hard. You know, sometimes the picture and the outcome that you have is so pretty that if it isn't exactly what you want, it does become a little disappointing. I can see that. So it's time for you to drop your guard. Okay, every one of those wands was picked up as a passion or a necessity, and you felt like you had to defend them to the death. Now you're saying, you know what? I don't need to defend all of these. I just need to take with me what's necessary. So stop trying to balance out the situation, because the universe has a way of equalizing things for you. And if you just sit back for a moment and you don't try to manipulate every little situation, the truths of what needs to happen will come, and you'll be able to communicate the truths a little bit more clearly. You'll be able to see why that very specific 1-inch target isn't going to make any sense, and why you should maybe just shoot for, you know, a foot in either direction of that 1-inch target. Because you need to get something before you know how to adjust, right? And that's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to pick a general direction, move in that direction, and see where that new growth takes you. And if you have to adjust your sight, if you have to change your roadmap halfway through, be willing to do so. Because forcing a particular outcome will always lead to disaster. I hope you found a message that serves your highest good. And I hope you can allow the leeway to let the universe come in and assist you on your journey. I'll see you guys next week.